Welcome to Football Never Sleeps, the aspiring to be viral, well-caffeinated, non-white pants-wearing, theme music-enhanced weekly YouTube show all about Notre Dame football and the fashion statements it makes along the way. I'm Eric Hansen, still in my TV clothes. He's Tyler James. That's his version of TV clothes. And you are our muses, so to speak. On tonight's show, we'll get to all the news of the day, including Notre Dame's newest injury hurdle. We'll chop it up when it comes to Saturday night's 50-2-3 waxing of Florida State and what it means to the Indy's path to its first ever 12-team college football playoff appearance. Saturday night was a big recruiting weekend of Appaloosa proportions. We'll check in to see if Tyler thinks the end result will come close to matching the electric backup. As usual, we're going to take your questions. So start filling up the queue and let me clear my throat. This is...
All right. Football Never Sleeps is presented by MyBookie. The Chicago Bears are trying to ruin my NFL Sundays, but I'm able to counterbalance all of that by spending my time on MyBookie. MyBookie is the one book that has your back. There's no fluff. There's no second guessing, just straight up action with decisions in your hands as you're looking for an edge. Maybe you have your eyes on a home favorite. You really like the under on a game total, or you want to bet against those Bears. MyBookie has what you need to make a good wager. And MyBookie has hooked us up with a deal for our Football Never Sleeps viewers. You can sign up with promo code INDS to double your first deposit of up to $1,000 with a 100% deposit bonus. You click the link in our video description below. And remember to use code INDS to take advantage of this incredible deal. Bet anything, anytime, from anywhere with MyBookie, the sports book that gives you control. All right, before we get the show rolling, make sure you're subscribed to us here on the YouTube channel, which is free. That allows us to read your questions and take your questions during the show. Make sure, and that way you won't miss any of our content that's coming up in the future as well. You can also sign up for a 30-day free trial to InsideNDSports.com with promo code NDYT. We always have that reminder scrolling there at the bottom for you. That gets you access to our premium analysis and recruiting coverage, and special access to us over on the Insider Lounge, where we spend a lot of our time. Our community shares all their opinions, and we drop our inside information there first. Like today, I had an intel piece on Notre Dame's recruiting weekend that I think people will be interested in if they haven't seen it already. Thanks to everyone for chiming in. James, Gary B., Eric, Swope, Brian, Scott. We appreciate everyone here tonight. We want to hear from you in the comments, even if you're watching on replay too, so don't be shy. All right, let's have a good show. Eric, first up for us is the Notre Dame injury report. Notre Dame did have a little bit of bad news, but I think it's good news in the long run. Notre Dame will be without starting nose tackle Howard Cross III for at least this week with a left ankle injury he suffered in the Florida State game. What's your confidence level in Donovan Heinisch as Cross's replacement?
Well, after the play against Florida State, it's a lot higher. He's been a little up and down this year. I think he started strong. There were some other games where, you look at his Pro Football Focus grade and it was pretty average. But he really stepped up when Howard Cross was out of the game. I mean, the one thing you're going to get from Donovan Heinisch is really good effort. You can move Gabe Rubio to both of those spots as well. The thing is, you really can't afford another injury at that spot without really dipping down into kind of Armel Mucum country. And I think that's not where Notre Dame wants to be at this point. When you look at the matchup against Virginia, they're not an overwhelmingly good running team. They're 86th in the country in rush offense. They're 127th in sacks allowed, which is pretty close to where Florida State was. So maybe there will be some good matchups for Donovan Heinisch. How about you? What do you think about it, Donovan?
Yeah, I like him better in small doses. I think it's probably going to force Gabriel Rubio to play both of those defensive tackle positions. I do like – I mean, it's a good thing that Heinisch stepped up against Florida State. He's coming off his best game. his presence was most felt against the pass, though. I think he needs to really strengthen his game against the run. That is somewhere that Notre Dame needs to have that strength. So I do think it's an opportunity for Notre Dame to get some action for those guys that haven't played much, that are bigger than Heinisch, whether it's Mucom or Sean Savillano. Sean Savillano played in his first game on Saturday. So Mucom's at 6'3", 302. Savillano 6'1", 320. So I think I'd be interested to see if there's more than just like fourth quarter time for those guys, because the way Notre Dame rotates, you got to have someone else in there. And if Rubio is spelling Mills some, it might be hard to. You got to have someone else to spell Heinisch. So we'll see how that plays out for Notre Dame. But maybe it helps Notre Dame in the long run. I think the big question after that is, how long can Notre Dame go without Cross if necessary? Marcus Freeman indicated that he would maybe only miss 1 week, but we don't know that for certain. Do you think Notre Dame can afford to not have him against Army? Sorry.
I think it starts getting sticky if you don't have him against Army. They have a really good center in Brady Small. I voted for him for actually midseason All-American. I think he's that good. And Army's had that kind of year with their offensive line. I believe they're number one in fewest sacks allowed, even though they don't throw the ball very often. They do throw it well. And Army is one of the best rushing teams too. So I think that's the game you'd love to have Howard Cross back, especially, again, the triple option discipline that Howard Cross has seen a zillion times, and Donovan Heinisch probably hasn't played against it nearly as much. So, and USC as well, you're going to need him for that. So I think even if it was precautionary to hold him out of this game, I think that was a good move. But Army, yeah, I think that would be when you need him back. And we don't know if Jason Anye is coming back this year at all. It's getting to the point that even if he does, how much can he help them, immediately? I think it takes some time to get him back into the football mode.
Yeah, to me, it feels like a gamble to not have Cross against Army. But I don't know, like if that jeopardizes his ability to play against USC, I think you have to maybe seriously consider keeping him sidelined. I think it's a delicate balance that Notre Dame has to sort of find with determining whether or not you need Howard Cross and how badly you need him, and what the risk is in terms of re-injury. With ankle injuries, they seem to be able to reoccur. I mean, just ask Jordan Faison, but at least it doesn't sound like it was as significant as what Jordan Faison was dealing with earlier in the season. All right, Notre Dame also has 3 players listed as questionable this week. Punt returner Max Hurleman with a left hamstring issue, running back Devin Ford with a right groin issue, and defensive end Logan Thomas with a right hamstring issue. That mostly impacts Notre Dame's special teams, though Ford does play with Notre Dame's number 1 offense at times. Freeman, from his comments, made it seem like Hurleman and Thomas may be probable to play against Virginia. I think the most interesting question to me is who's the pick to play punt returner if Hurleman can't go?
I would think it would be Faison at this point. The fact that he looks like he's 100% at this point, I think he gives you a little bit more burst back there than Jaden Greathouse. If all you care about is catching it, I think Jaden Greathouse can do the John Goodman role of catching it, raising his hand and catching it. But I think if you want to catch it and get a few yards, I think Faison would be the guy that I would put back there.
Yeah, the Faison thing, you wonder if that puts him maybe at more of a risk to get injured if the guy's diving at his legs on returns. Like that's maybe not the most ideal spot for a guy that's been dealing with ankle issues. And Faison was out there for the fumble, right? Or the muff punt. Was that him out there, right? Am I accurate, or was that Greathouse, or was that Hurleman?
I'm sorry.
Notre Dame had a muff punt earlier this year. Who was the returner? Wasn't it Faison?
I believe it was Faison early in the year. Yes.
So and that was Jaden Mickey was still on the roster. Jaden Mickey.
I thought you were talking about Saturday. I thought, boy, that must have been
no,
throwing away trash or something at that point. I was like, when did that happen?
Yeah, I mean, it was long ago that Jaden Mickey played in the game, but you wonder if that is a concern. I don't know how much they blame Faison for that, but if that is a concern at all, then I think you feel like someone who's just going to secure the football and let the offense get back out there is maybe the best bet moving forward. Everyone in the comments is backing me up that it was Faison, so I think we got that. Got that right.
I mean, the one thing Hurleman does that I like is I've mentioned this to Marty Biaggi, the special teams coordinator, and then all of a sudden the next week he was back there. I said, he reminds me a little bit of Zibikowski. And he goes, I remember Zibikowski as a punt returner here. And then all of a sudden there was Hurleman. I mean, he catches it well, and then he gets you a few yards. I think Jaden Greathouse is too much of a fair catch guy. And maybe Faison did that a little bit early in the season too. There were some, I can't remember which one was back there, but there were some punts that should have been caught at least, and they bounced and got an extra 10 yards on the bounce. So somebody that will run up and catch the ball and not let the ball bounce, I think is big. But I'm not going to fight you whether you think it's Faison or Greathouse. But Faison would be my choice if you want a little bit more burst.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the college football playoff picture before we start jumping into questions. First one,
no frowny faces though.
No frowny faces. After Notre Dame's win over Florida State, the AP ranked Notre Dame at number 8 in the country. Eric, that is a poll that you cast a ballot for. Where did you rank Notre Dame? And then secondly, where do you expect the college football playoff committee to rank Notre Dame on Tuesday night?
Right. So they moved from 10 to 8 in the AP poll. They moved from 8 to 7 in the coaches poll. I had Notre Dame holding at number 6. I had them number 6 previously. In an ideal world, I don't have the team that I'm covering higher than the rest of the electorate collectively, but I'm going to, well, I mean, it's not a great look.
No.
Like if I'm doing it with another team, like last year I had Washington higher than most people did, and lo and behold, they were in the championship game. But
not that anyone's keeping track.
Not that anybody's keeping track, but and I had Iowa State lower, and what happened to them? But the thing is, I don't think you can, if you really believe that that's where the team should be, you need to put them there. And that is really my feeling. You can't be a coward and say, well, people are going to hit me on Twitter. You know, that's where I think Notre Dame belongs, based on the wins that they have, based on that they're an improving team. I don't discount the loss against Northern Illinois, but I think that game was a long time ago, and this is a team that's definitely separated themselves from that week. So that's where I had them, was number 6. I wanted just to explain my thought process, and I did look at different teams. I mean, I did jump a team over Notre Dame. I jumped Tennessee over Notre Dame. Now, they may jump back behind Notre Dame after they play Georgia, or they may stay where they are. But I go back and I look at all the games, and Tennessee's win over Alabama, given what Alabama did Saturday, gave Tennessee greater value than when they first beat Alabama, in my mind.
So what do you think the committee's going to do? What do you think? How will they differ from yours? I'm guessing it probably will differ, right?
I don't think, certainly they'd have them higher than 8th. I think probably 8 or 9 is probably where they'll end up. But I wouldn't rule out still being at 10. I could see, you know, they look, you know, they say they don't look at the polls and so forth. They may not. I think for sure they'll put Miami behind Notre Dame, but they may not put Georgia. And then they may jump Alabama and Ole Miss past Notre Dame. I don't think that would be fair in Ole Miss's case. They lost to Kentucky, which is a 3-win team. Mm-hmm. And I think that has to count, just like Notre Dame's Northern Illinois loss. So I believe Ole Miss also lost to LSU. But they have a great win over Georgia, but it's not all about what's your best win and what's your worst loss. You have to look at everything together. So again, I think 8 or 9 is probably where it's going to end up.
Yeah, I think the 9 seed is what makes sense, like an 8th ranking and the 9 seed, because that's assuming Miami's ranked below Notre Dame and jumps ahead of them as an ACC champion in the projection. So that's my guess based on what they did last time, but we know that these do have the ability, based on how they want to do this, to change in ways maybe you're not predicting from week to week. That I feel like I don't know. We don't know, and we don't know how the 12 team picture changes the values of the different things. Like getting mentioned that a good loss is valuable, like that isn't necessarily always really mentioned very much by the committee, but that was brought up last week. And how long will good losses retain their value, I think, is an interesting question.
That was one of the things I wanted to ask. I didn't get through. There were a zillion questions in the teleconference, and I didn't get called on, but that would have been my question.
Yeah, we'll see if the one and only, they gotta know who you are. I mean, let the one and only Eric Hansen.
Should I put one and only when the operator asks my name? Say the one and only Eric Hansen, and my organization is first in line.
So what's left on Notre Dame's schedule are 3 winnable games versus Virginia, who's 5-4. Army's ranked 16th in the AP poll now at 9-0, and Notre Dame play them out at Yankee Stadium, and then end the season at USC, who's 4-5. What, if anything, Eric, do you think can trip Notre Dame up in these last 3 games?
In terms of their taking care of their own business, or the whole big picture?
No, in terms of playing against those teams.
Well, I think Army does present a challenge because they're Navy with a more traditional triple option offense, but a very good defense to go with it. Now, again, Army hasn't played a really good schedule, which is why I think the committee had them 25th and not in the teens like the AP and the coaches poll have them. But I think they'll be formidable. But I think USC is going to be extra difficult because Notre Dame is going to be coming out of that straight into a conventional offense. At least with Navy, they had a bye week to kind of get back into the form of playing a conventional offense. Going from, and there have been times in the past, not necessarily under Marcus, but times under Brian Kelly, where that post triple option hangover was a real thing, that next game going back against a traditional offense was difficult. USC still has really good skill position players. They protect their quarterback well. They've changed quarterbacks, so maybe the new guy is much better than the other guy. So, but Notre Dame, it's not just about surviving those games. It's continuing to improve and continuing to look like a team that's deserving of a home game, the kind of seeding and the kind of ranking that would get them a home game in the playoff. But there's other things outside of their control we can talk about that I think can help them as well.
Yeah, I think the transition from Army to USC is certainly going to be an interesting one. The fact that you're playing them on opposite coasts a week apart makes it interesting. Notre Dame has done that before, back in 2018, in going East Coast, West Coast. With the end of that schedule in 2018 was interesting with USC, San Diego in the mix there, and a game out at USC and out at Yankee Stadium. So I think that transition is the thing that I'm most curious about. I think Army should be winnable, but the way they dominate possession makes anything sort of on the table in those games. If you make one mistake, things could get tough in a hurry. But I like the way Notre Dame's defense is playing and their ability to adapt and make the adjustments required to slow down Army. In terms of if Notre Dame wins out, I think it's reasonable to expect that there's a chance for Notre Dame to host a playoff game. What are the variables from your perspective that either could force Notre Dame out of a top 8 spot or maybe help Notre Dame along in terms of getting into a top 8 spot?
Well, I think let's talk about beyond what Notre Dame can do for itself.
Right.
I think that the better Texas A&M and Louisville do, the better off Notre Dame is. That makes their wins look bigger. That gives them ranked wins. Texas A&M has Texas at the end of the schedule. If they win that game and their other games, they'll be in the SEC championship game. I believe they'll have a tiebreaker then to be in it. And Louisville has 3 winnable games, not easy games, but 3 winnable games that could put them at 9-3 and get them maybe in the top 20 or even the top 15. And then if Army, if their only losses to Notre Dame, if they beat Navy and they have one other, I think, conference game, they'll be in their conference championship game. They'll either play Navy or Tulane in the conference championship game. Tulane is, I believe, in both of the, or at least the AP poll this week. And so all those things kind of add up well for Notre Dame. The other thing that helps them, Tyler, is in general, some of these big conferences have really loaded November schedules.
Mm-hmm.
With the realignment, that's not the case anymore. Penn State has 1 top 50 victory, and that's over Illinois. And they do not play a formidable team the rest of the way. Minnesota is the best team they play. They're a 6-4 team. You look at a lot of the teams that are competing for Notre Dame for a playoff spot. Notre Dame is one of the few that has 2 teams with a winning record left on their schedule. And that's going to help. Penn State doesn't have the octane. I don't think Ole Miss plays anybody. If they don't pass Notre Dame this week and Notre Dame keeps winning, they're not going to pass Notre Dame. And so that's going to play in Notre Dame's favor as well. The thing that tripped up Notre Dame in 2015 before they lost to Stanford was they started stubbing their toe against bad teams late in the year, against a really bad Boston College team at Fenway Park. They weren't super impressive against a Wake Forest team at home, and the committee started to notice that. So they need to keep their own momentum going and look good against these teams in addition to winning those games.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what, like, some of those teams that are in the conversation with Notre Dame now, like, what happens to them, or maybe some of them that aren't like, I don't think the ACC is going to be a factor for Notre Dame, right? Like, I don't think a 2-loss Miami, if they lose in the conference championship game, is going to be able to be ahead of Notre Dame. And so, like, in that case, like, SMU beats Miami in the ACC championship. Welcome to the ACC, kind of like Notre Dame back in 2020, making themselves known in the ACC. The 1-loss Penn State conversation is not going to go away. I think that's going to be a weekly thing that we're tracking every week. What is a 1-loss Indiana? Where does that team end up in comparison to Notre Dame if its 1 loss is just to Ohio State? And that which then would, if Ohio State wins out, prevents Indiana from getting into the Big Ten championship game. Some of the like Texas, for instance, if Texas loses in the SEC championship game, is that a team that's in the conversation to be ahead of Notre Dame?
What I'll say this: the committee has hinted that they're not going to penalize teams in conference championship games, which would be kind of a new thing. I don't know what they mean, how extreme, like,
to what extent
you just throw it out. What if you lose 73-0 like Wisconsin did to Ohio State in 2014? I'm not saying that that's going to happen to anybody, but to just blanketly say that it wouldn't affect you, I don't think is correct. But I did on my poll story on Sunday, I laid out all the remaining schedules for the top 13 teams in the AP poll. So you can look and see what everybody has left. And besides Notre Dame,
which I've been actively doing, I have it pulled up for the show. So I encourage anyone else to do that too.
Right. So besides Notre Dame, the other teams that there are only 3 teams that have 2 teams with winning records left: Texas, Georgia, and Tennessee. Georgia and Tennessee play each other this week. So that's probably an elimination game for Georgia if they lose. And it would probably put Tennessee below Notre Dame if they lose. I think, the other thing, Tyler, is, the committee doesn't look ahead. So they're not looking at the soft schedules for other teams that are coming up. They're just looking at the snapshot of where they are now. So a soft schedule at the very end could hurt a team. And who would have thought that Virginia and Army are what's the buoyancy in Notre Dame's case here in November?
All right. Well, let's get to some of the questions our folks have sent us throughout the show. We appreciate you guys sending questions. And if you have more questions, do not be afraid to ask them. Let's start with James. After watching the celebration for Mitchell Evans and Deion Colzie, there seems to be great team chemistry. What are your thoughts on this team's chemistry versus prior teams?
I think I think the team chemistry is very good on this team. I'm not sure that there has been a chemistry problem in the other Marcus Freeman years. I'm not quite sure how to answer this, Tyler. I'll let you take it.
Yeah, I think Notre Dame has good chemistry. To me, I think chemistry can sometimes be better measured against adversity than in good moments. Yeah. It's cool to see those guys celebrating Mitchell Evans for getting his first touchdown of the season after coming back from the ACL. Deion Colzie scoring after being a guy who stuck around in the program. There's a reason why those guys are getting so much appreciation from their teammates, because there's an appreciation for what those guys have been through. And so that, I think that's sort of normal. I don't think that's abnormal. But I think if Notre Dame didn't have good chemistry, I don't think the season would have played out the way it has since the Northern Illinois game, right? I think a team that had bad chemistry would have fallen apart after a loss like that. But this Notre Dame team has good chemistry and was able to right the ship and get itself back in a position to make the playoff. How does that compare to other teams? I don't necessarily know that I have a good way to compare that. But I other than just saying, I think the team chemistry is good and something that is aiding this Notre Dame team versus hurting it. You don't hear a ton about bad chemistry with teams unless it's a disastrous season, right? The 2016 team. Yeah, 2016 team didn't have good chemistry, but you could sort of expect that based on the way the games went.
But some of that bad chemistry on that team was the players versus Brian Kelly. Quentin Nelson went into Brian Kelly's office, and a lot of the players did during those exit interviews, and ripped him. And Quentin could, because Quentin could go, bye, I'm going to the NFL. And he ended up sticking around. He believed what Brian Kelly told him. Brian Kelly put it in action, and that was the beginning of kind of this renaissance that we've seen Notre Dame have. So I think Tyler made a great point. The first puff of adversity is when you start to find out what kind of chemistry you have, not when everything's going great. Everybody can be happy and nice when things are going good and everybody's scoring a touchdown and getting a snack.
All right, Eric Swope says, being at the game Saturday night, I was excited with the Notre Dame atmosphere, which rattled the opposition pretty effectively. That said, when was the last time we had this many sacks in a game?
Tyler, I'll let you start to answer about the atmosphere, and I think I have the answer stored here about when the last
I think I have the answer too. I think it's 2019 against Virginia is because I wrote about Notre Dame's defensive line, so it was definitely in my story, and I think my memory is correct there.
I do think you're right. So Virginia, so maybe they'll get 8 more.
Yeah. I think it was a good atmosphere. I think it started out a bit slow, and I think some of that is due to, I think Notre Dame sort of back ends a lot of its stuff to get the crowd going. Although Micah Shrewsbury did talk at some point in the first, I'm pretty sure it was the first half, and he was trying to get the crowd into it. I think a lot of what happens is the play dictates it too. Like if the offense is sputtering, people aren't going to be as fired up when the defense is out there, just because they're just a little bit more apathetic about what's happening on the other side of the ball. So I think it was a good atmosphere. It doesn't necessarily compare to the best atmospheres in college football, but I think it was overall a good atmosphere for Notre Dame, and I think they're at least trying things. Like they did they brought DJ Cool into the stadium to have a performance. Now I think people probably have mixed opinions on whether or not they like that song or like DJ Cool, but I think it's a pretty cool twist to have like someone actually there performing the song. I think it's been sort of trendy, at least in Major League Baseball. It became kind of trendy in the playoffs. So I don't know if this is where things are heading with sports, but the beginning was big. Like they brought out fireworks and stuff for the intro. Like they tried to set the stage pretty good there. Notre Dame's offense was a bit slow to start, but I thought the crowd was pretty good throughout the game later on. What do you think, Eric?
I was looking up to see what the sack record was, but I'll do that another time. Yeah, I thought that the atmosphere built as the game went on. I thought it started out the same tire shtick. Okay, everybody's got to be quiet because this person's talking and doing, and there's a junior reporter and the Irish in the NFL and what's going on at the chemistry lab. And I think it deadens the game. But then they started doing some new things and the music was better. And the crowd and the play on the field just wouldn't let that atmosphere stagnate, and it just got really, really good. So I thought that was great because, again, I've had people come in for games earlier this year and they go, what is the deal with everybody having to be quiet to listen between series of this jabbering? And even if it were me jabbering, I wouldn't want to hear that. So I thought they handled it a lot better. And I asked Marcus Freeman today, would you rather have more night games? Because the night games have been very special.
Gary B says, how about Taylor Swift for a home playoff game? I think Taylor Swift is above the level of performing at college football games. She commands.
John Bon Jovi was there. He was there just taking it all in.
John Bon Jovi's not selling out stadiums across the world right now. They can perform. They dedicated.
Is he dating anybody on the Chiefs?
They dedicated an entire halftime show to John Bon Jovi. I think he was sort of obligated to be there. So, and he's a Notre Dame fan. I don't know that Taylor Swift has strong opinions, even though obviously she's been to Notre Dame for a game in the past. Gary B asked, are you surprised that the passing game wasn't sharper coming out of the bye week?
A little, because I think that was the expectation for Mike Denbrock and so forth. And yet it wasn't a disaster. I mean, and Florida State wasn't a very good defense all the way around. You look at the completion percentage, 14 of 27, but Riley still threw for 215 yards in about 3 quarters. Still was really strong in the running game, which I know is not part of the passing game, and had some decent throws. It just wasn't as consistent as you like. I think that's kind of what happens when you're progressing. It's not always a perfectly straight line. And I look like I'm in a cave tonight for some reason, but
you just now noticed?
Well, no, I just decided to acknowledge it. So I don't know what's going on here. Anyways,
we got to get you some backlighting.
Okay. Anyways, yeah, I was surprised. That was what the question was. I wasn't in the dark about that question.
Yeah, I mean, I guess to me, like, a bye isn't going to like make you more accurate necessarily, or like
I know what it is. It's the white shirt. Every time I've worn the white shirt, it throws off the light balance. Go ahead.
Okay. All right.
If I had
I
a
don't think
smock to put on.
I don't think the bye like solves your problems in terms of in the moment timing. Like obviously you practice plays and you would like to think, especially the plays you've scripted, will be run correctly, but just one change in protection and stuff like that can sort of throw those things off. And so Riley Leonard was off with some of his throws. His receivers dropped some passes in the game. So I think it was a bit of an underwhelming overall performance by the passing game, both the quarterback and the receivers, and even maybe a little bit the offensive line didn't play its best in pass protection. Excuse me. So I think it's a work in progress as we've been saying all season, and I don't think like a week off was necessarily going to be guarantee that it was going to be that much sharper. All right, Brian Habermill asks, with Pittsburgh's quarterback getting hurt due to a late hit by Virginia, if you were Freeman, would you mention collision control to Riley Leonard at all this week? He took a few shots against Florida State, i.e. after the touchdown.
Go ahead. You start that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would say yes. I mean, there was one that he sort of ran to the sideline, and it seemed like clear that he wasn't going to give him any more yardage. But then like a guy sort of like dove at his legs right when he was like getting ready to go out of bounds. And it was a situation that I thought Riley Leonard could have easily slid to prevent being hit. So I think there are times that Riley Leonard needs to be more careful. And I think it's something that Notre Dame should and probably will continue to remind him, but they obviously know that he's going to be aggressive, and that's the big part of Notre Dame's offense. But there are situations where, okay, we don't need you got the first down. We don't need an extra yard here. Like get down. There's sometimes that it's not worth taking a hit. And so like if it's fighting to get to the goal line, I think they're going to be okay with that. But if it's just, hey, you want to step out of bounds instead of sliding, unless it's to stop the clock in a situation that you need to stop the clock, then just slide and get down and get back to the huddle safely.
And I would imagine, Brian, you didn't mean for Freeman to specifically talk about the Pittsburgh quarterback getting hurt. You were just saying in general collision control, and this is a reminder because you don't want to put it in a quarterback's head that you're going to get hurt. You're going to get hurt. I mean, we had Brandon Wimbush on the podcast earlier this year, and he talked about the mentality of a quarterback that has those running skills, and you know how to protect yourself, and you know when you need to run out of bounds, you know when you need to slide. I think Riley Leonard's done enough of it that he knows most of those things. I don't think it hurts to mention to him, hey, we need you to be smart, but you also don't want him to be timid. I mean, most quarterbacks get hurt on a sack or when they're not expecting, not when they're not a seasoned runner like Riley Leonard is that leads all Power 4 quarterbacks in rushing yards per carry and rushing yards per game. So I think he knows what he's doing, but it doesn't hurt to say, hey, let's just be smart and just not go overboard with, oh my God, you're going to get hurt. Virginia hurt a quarterback last week.
All right. TD4ND says, is Riley Leonard's inaccuracy the limitation to this offense?
Well, going into the Florida State game, he had the third highest completion percentage in a season in Notre Dame history. That said, I don't think it's his inaccuracy. I think they'd like him to be more consistent, and they would like him to continue to be able to make more throws. And I think consistently the last few weeks he's done that. Pro Football Focus rates him every week. And in 2 of the last 3 weeks, he had 2 of his best games of his entire career, according to them. Now, that also includes what he does running the ball. But I don't think you narrow it down to that. I'm sorry. I'm having trouble with a lot of these questions tonight just because I don't agree with the premise of the question. I think there's a lot of things in the way the offense can get better. Riley Leonard being a more consistent thrower is one of them. The offensive line getting better, and I think with Billy Schrauth they will, is one of them. Mitchell Evans playing more like Mitchell Evans is one of them. Jordan Faison becoming a threat at field receiver is one of them. So I think there's not one single element is what the cap is on this. It's all those things, and they're all connected. As they get better, Notre Dame can raise the ceiling of its offense that is 12th in the country in scoring right now.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I mean, if Leonard is throwing inaccurately, it doesn't really matter what the other players are doing in terms of the passing game. Like if you can't get them the ball, then that's a problem. But I don't think it's to that extent. Like I don't think that is the severity of Riley Leonard's accuracy issues. So I think it's something that needs to continue to be worked on. And to me, I don't get the sense that it's an ability issue for Riley Leonard. Like sometimes it's just like footwork's bad, or he saw something too late, so he threw it too late, and then that prevents you from being as accurate with the throw as you want to. So I think there's a number of things that go into it. I do think like in order for Notre Dame's offense to reach its ceiling, Riley Leonard has to be the best version of himself. And probably Leonard above all in terms of all the other players on Notre Dame's offense. But I also don't think he has to turn into one of the best passers in college football for Notre Dame to have a dynamic offense that's hard to stop.
I mean, their passing efficiency numbers has been going up every week. It's not high enough, but it's been moving up every week. They're 68 this week. They were in the hundreds in September.
All right. Scott Fegan says, if Riley Leonard does get injured, does Notre Dame have the quarterbacks to get the team into the playoffs and win?
I think Steve Angeli could win games for you. And given who they're facing in the last 3 games and what the pass rush for those teams look like, I think Steve Angeli probably could get Notre Dame into the playoff. I'm not sure once they get there that he matches up. It depends who they draw in the playoff. But I think Steve Angeli is a pretty good backup quarterback. I think a lot of teams would love to have that guy be your number 2 quarterback.
Yeah, I think like if Leonard didn't play the rest of the regular season, I think Steve Angeli could win the next 3 games. The playoff game is more questionable. Like, what's that matchup? If it's a home game, obviously you feel a little bit better about Notre Dame's chances because then not only are they playing at home, but they're also the higher seed and perceived to be the better team. But there could be a lower seeded team that's strong defensively that then becomes a problem for Steve Angeli. So I think it would be Angeli. I know there was another question from someone. Paul Kinlan asked, is it possible that Notre Dame will practice a long throw with Angeli or even Carr as a special play in the playoffs? Like, I don't think that is something that will happen. Angeli's only playing if Leonard isn't playing. I don't know what that would necessarily look like. And CJ Carr is healing an elbow still, so he's not going to be added into the mix realistically. So it rides on Riley Leonard, but then if Steve Angeli is called upon, I think there are expectations that he would play well. I wouldn't expect Notre Dame to be able to make a long run in the playoffs, even if it gets out of the first game. But I think depending on the matchup, he could win a first round playoff game. All right. Tyler Iam said, Eric, you just alluded to things that could happen that could hurt Notre Dame's chances. If Notre Dame wins out, is there any scenario you can think of that could keep them out of the playoff?
I don't think that exists. And if Notre Dame wins and doesn't like eke past Virginia on a 61-yard field goal and a fluky finish in 9 overtimes at USC, I just can't see there being a scenario where Notre Dame doesn't get in. I'm sure that there are people that predict that, and they predict it against about other teams as well. But you think about who still has left to play: Georgia and Tennessee, Ohio State and Indiana. It doesn't seem like there's a scenario where the ACC would be a two-bid league now that Miami has lost. And it doesn't seem like the Big 12 can be a two-bid league. There's just not a second team. You know, if BYU were to lose to one of those teams down the standings in the Big 12 now that Iowa State isn't highly ranked, I think that's problematic for BYU. They would be behind Notre Dame. So I don't see that happening. I think 11-1 and Notre Dame is in.
Yeah, it would be hard to get there for that. Like you would need basically all the teams ahead of Notre Dame that are ahead of Notre Dame to lose in their like conference championships, but also be far enough ahead of Notre Dame to not fall below Notre Dame. And you would just need like a lot of upsets. But the thing is, like, a lot of these teams that are going to be playing in the championship game for the conference are going to be in this mix already. So it's not like you're going to get like, it's not like the old Big Ten when you have like an Iowa that could steal a bid because they have they play the weak side of the conference. That doesn't exist anymore with the teams that don't, or the conferences not having divisions. So there are scenarios that force your top teams to play against each other when that wasn't always the case prior to this 12-team playoff picture.
Right. I mean, what's the scenario that Miami could sneak past, Notre Dame and get? There really isn't one. They don't have the schedule strength to jump past Notre Dame.
Yeah, I wouldn't think so. Although,
unless they won the ACC championship.
Yeah, if they win the ACC championship, they're going to be in there no matter.
SMU. I mean, then you're one bid league.
Right.
Right.
But it would be it's more of the Big Ten SEC that would cause the issues right now. But I just don't think that there's teams that are going to get in the playoff that would get in the championship games that would make a difference to knock Notre
Right.
Dame.
I mean, okay, so you're losing me on that. So if the Big Ten championship were tomorrow, Ohio State and Oregon, well, I mean, those teams are ahead of Notre Dame already now. And with the SEC, there are SEC teams ahead of Notre Dame now. So I don't know what would change in terms of somebody else winning in those two leagues. I mean, they're going to be multiple leagues. They're going to have not just two teams, they're going to have at least three and maybe even four teams from those leagues.
Yeah, I mean, worst case scenario for Notre Dame would be IU goes undefeated, right? Like IU wins the Big Ten conference. So then you have Oregon, Indiana, and then maybe Penn State still ahead of Notre Dame, and then Ohio State potentially. Although I think that maybe wouldn't happen if Indiana beat Ohio State.
If Indiana beats Ohio State and they have 3 losses, right?
Or no, they'd only have 2 because then they wouldn't make the Big Ten championship game.
Right.
So you're looking at maybe the Big Ten gets 4 teams in there. I don't.
Well, right now they're 1, 2, 4, and 5, so they've got 4 in there. So I mean, Notre Dame's in with those 4 being, and they're not going to get any more than those 4.
Right.
So count those 4 in. 1, 2, 4, 5. They're in. So I don't think there's a scenario in the Big Ten where somebody's coming from outside of that,
right,
to jump to the top of that pile and then knock all those down. And then in the SEC, the teams with 1 loss right now are Tennessee, Texas A&M, and Texas. Texas A&M and Texas are going to play each other the last weekend. If they both still only have 1 loss at that point, then the winner will be in the SEC championship and the loser's out. And if Tennessee beats Georgia, they're likely going to be the other team there. And then you're looking at Georgia, Ole Miss, Alabama, Missouri, LSU. Those teams aren't going to be in it. If Notre Dame is ahead of Alabama and Ole Miss, there's not really opportunities for those teams then to pass unless they somehow get in the championship game in a crazy playoff, at which point that means Texas has a bunch of losses and wouldn't be in the championship game. So I don't see that there's a scenario where that what you laid out is going to happen. Alabama after this, they play Mercer, a 500 Oklahoma team, and a 3-6 Auburn team. So if they're not ahead of Notre Dame this week, they're not moving past them unless they're in the SEC championship game.
Yeah, just trying to do the math in my head. Like even if the SEC gets 4 teams, the Big Ten gets 4 teams, then you're going to have 2 more conference champs, an ACC champ, a Big 12 champ. That's 10 teams. So you still need 2 more teams to get ahead of Notre Dame in that picture, and it just doesn't seem like there's a way for that to happen.
You still have the group of 5 team, but then you'd have
so
one
then you would
more.
still need one. You would still need one more, right?
Right.
All right. Let's see. Another question from Tyler Iams. Jaden Harrison has impressed me a couple times this season and strikes me as a potential playmaker. I recall even you guys had him at the bottom of the depth chart, but why?
I mean, we're not calling for him to be at the bottom of the depth chart. We never had him at the bottom of the depth chart. We've had Logan Saldate at the bottom of the slot receivers. And I think plenty of times on this show, I've talked about how impressed I was with Jaden Harrison's speed back in the spring and even in the fall. But I mean, should he be playing more than Jaden Greathouse? I don't think so, but I think he's in the rotation and he's playing what he deserves to play and he's helping the team. I've always liked him. I'm not sure where that's coming from. Do I sound like a get off your lawn kind of guy tonight?
No, I mean, I think it's fair. Like we did not have Jaden Harrison at the bottom of our depth chart, so that is a fair defense of our reporting. You update the depth chart every week, and so I know you.
It's what Notre Dame's depth chart is. It's not like we're saying Notre Dame, you're wrong. This is how we would have it.
Right, but we do have our own depth chart that we make projections on beyond the 2 deep, and we never, even then, before the season started, I don't think we ever had Logan Saldate ahead of him. So I don't know. It is interesting. Like I think it's just so hard to find playing time for all. They have too many slot guys. Like that was something we thought going into the season. I'm still not. I mean, it seems to me that Jordan Faison's a better slot than he is a field receiver. Granted, maybe that's just because he hasn't been healthy this season to prove that he can be a better field receiver than a slot receiver. But to me, I think slot seems to be the best use of his skill set. The same goes for Jaden Greathouse. The same goes for Jaden Harrison. So you have 3 guys there that's arguably their best position. And so unless you're running 4 wide and you have double slots, you're not going to have a lot of time for slot guys. And Notre Dame plays their tight ends in the slots from time to time too. So I think it's just hard to get all those guys on the field, even though like you don't look at wide receiver as necessarily a strength for Notre Dame. The very specific position Jaden Harrison does play is probably the strength of Notre Dame's wide receiver core. All right, I think that's it on the question portion, Eric. We had a few before we get out of here. I do want to say Happy Veterans Day to everyone that has served. Marcus Freeman spent some time talking about it today. His father spent time in the Air Force. So I wanted to make sure that we said that. Should have probably said it at the start of the show, so my apologies for that. Notre Dame even has a veteran on its team, Eric Goins, who has been doing kickoffs for the Irish, served in the Army overseas. And then there's 2 guys on Notre Dame's roster who are in the Army ROTC program, Jerry Rulo, and who's a linebacker, and cornerback Mickey Brown. I know Rulo played in the game this past weekend. I'm not sure if Mickey Brown did or not, but I was quizzing.
Did not play.
I was quizzing myself at the end of the game when guys were being put into the game to know if I recognized their numbers from the guys that are walk-ons, and I was not to toot my own horn too much, but I was impressing some people. They couldn't believe that I knew who some of those guys were. But I ID our photos for our photographer, and so I get so many of those photos that I try to make sure that I remember all the numbers for those guys.
There were 67 players that played on offense or defense, 11 of them for the first time this season, and some of them for the first time in their career, and 13 more that were special teams only players. So 80 guys got in the game.
All right. There was a lot of discussion about the value of playing time for reserves late in games at today's press conference with Marcus Freeman. Do you think Freeman has handled that significantly different than other coaches have at Notre Dame?
I think there's a higher expectation that it's not garbage time, that it's meaningful snaps. Marcus has really tried to sell the players on your role, whatever, however small, however large, is a big deal to our team. And I thought it was interesting that he's always called out the scout team players of the week. And Brendan Vernon got a mention today as the defensive scout team player of the week. Brendan Vernon played 5 snaps. They were the first 5 snaps he's played this season. And he's a guy that we get asked about a lot. Why isn't he playing? What's going on with him? And yet this deep into the season, he was impactful enough to get scout team player of the week for them. But you look at, sometimes when you look at the Pro Football Focus ratings from those guys that get a handful of snaps, and there are some pretty high scores from those guys. So I do think that they're taking it seriously, and Marcus takes it seriously. And I think that's a good thing. I think it helps your team, especially in this era of transfer portal stuff, being able to have such easy player movement, feeling like you're part of the team and you're contributing, I think is a big deal, and it's good for team morale and team chemistry.
Yeah, there you go. It allows for a moment like Deion Colsey catching a touchdown pass and for him to have a nice celebration with his teammates. So, yeah, I think it feels a little bit more intentional, but I don't know. Like Brian Kelly would empty the bench when they're beating teams. Like I think what's happening is Notre Dame's beating teams by lopsided scores pretty regularly, and you have a lot of opportunities for that. But like, and I think it does matter more in games like, say, Florida State. Like Florida State's putting in your backups late against Florida State, I think is different than, you know, we don't have a comparison for, or it's different than playing them late against Miami of Ohio, for instance. Like you're the quality of a backup even at Florida State is going to be better than it is at some of those other MAC programs or a lower tier program that you play sometimes. So I do think that matters. I think it's a good way to sort of evaluate guys when the lights come on. I think especially for freshmen at the end of the season to keep them motivated, especially the guys that have been held out to keep their red shirt. There's lots of benefits to it. And I think obviously the system within Marcus Freeman is working within is a little bit different than what previous coaches we're dealing with too. All right, let's talk a little bit of recruiting, Eric, before we get out of here.
Okay, you want my opinion on how it went?
Yeah. Tell us how it went, Eric.
I thought it was a recruiting weekend of Appaloosa proportions. But you will tell us who the guys are that we should know about. I mean, I could tell you who they are, but I don't know which way they're leaning, except for the fact that I read your report, and I know you want to decide how much of that to reveal. So take it away. I will say this. We're a little more than 3 weeks away from the early signing period. It is early this year.
Yes, yeah. So make sure people know that. I think it's December 4th is the first
December
Wednesday.
4th through the 6th.
Yep. December 4th is the start of the early signing period. So as soon as we get back from USC after Thanksgiving, it's going to be the week of the early signing period. So it's kind of wild to think of, especially in a world where it's like, it's important to finish the season out in California so you can recruit after. It's like, well, no, you got to get home and finish your class now. So I'll say this, like Eric alluded to, like, I don't want to give too much away, but we have all the information that we can report available on the Insider Lounge to our Inside ND Sports subscribers. So use that code NDYT if you have not tried us out previously, and you can get access to that information. The recruits that I think Notre Dame is in the best position for as it relates to the 2025 class coming out of the weekend are running back Nolan James, a Boston College commit, wide receiver Antoine Parham, a Tulane commit, and linebacker Madden Faramo. I think Notre Dame put itself in position to battle for guys like defensive end Jalen Wiggins out of Florida, who's committed to Florida and is out of Florida, tight end Andrew Olesh, who's committed to Michigan, and then wide receiver Derek Meadows, who's committed to LSU. I still think there's plenty of work to do on all three of those guys, but I think Notre Dame is in the conversation and is working to make things interesting heading into that early signing period. A couple of guys worth mentioning in the 2026 class, Thomas Davis Jr., linebacker. I probably feel the best about him ending up in Notre Dame's class. And then defensive tackle Mikhail Blade out of the Chicago area is someone that I believe Notre Dame is in a good spot for too. But if you want all the recruiting information we have, the best place to get that is on InsideNDSports.com and the Insider Lounge for our premium subscribers.
Jeff Stevens had a question that you ignored, and I'm going to answer it. He wanted to know what I got my grandkids for their birthdays. There were two of them that had birthdays yesterday. They have the same date. They're not twins, different years. So for my 13-year-old grandson, he asked for a girlfriend, and I got him a Target gift card. And then my granddaughter, who turned 6, got little girl's makeup with a tiara and earrings, and she says she is a princess now.
All right. Well, I need to tell Joe and Sid to go to their corners. The fight is over. You guys are getting personal. And thankfully, the show is ending because they've been arguing back and forth about their opinions, and now we're straying a little bit too far out of football talk. Before we get out of here, make sure that you subscribe to us on InsideNDSports.com. 30-day free trial for our YouTube audience with code NDYT. Make sure you subscribe to us here on the YouTube channel. Gets you access to all the future content we have coming up. Our schedule for the week. We'll have our Inside ND Sports podcast uploaded on Thursday. Place your bets coming on Friday. And then Eric and I will share our post-game takeaways late Saturday night after the Virginia game. And as always, check out our content on InsideNDSports.com and have a good week.